The applause was deafening. I stood at the back of Harrington University's main auditorium, my throat tight, my hands gripping the seat in front of me so hard my knuckles turned white. 500 people were on their feet. Cameras flashed. Faculty members dabbed their eyes with handkerchiefs. And my twin sister Lydia Hartley stood on that stage, smiling like she had just won an Oscar, while Dean Alderton lifted a gleaming gold award and announced that her groundbreaking doctoral thesis had permanently transformed the field of environmental science. My stomach fell straight through the floor. 'Cause those slides behind her? I recognized every single one. That graph on slide 4, I built it from 18 months of raw field data. That methodology section on slide 7, I rewrote it 6 times, always at 3 in the morning when the apartment was completely quiet. Conclusion paragraph at the end, those were my exact words. Word. For. Word. My vision blurred. My heart hammered so loud I could actually hear it above the applause. I did not plan what happened next. My body just moved on its own. I stood up. My chair scraped backward across the floor. My voice came out shaking but loud enough to slice straight through the clapping. That's my work. The applause died instantly. 500 heads turned toward me. Lydia tilted her head slowly, the way she always did when she wanted to look calm and reasonable. She leaned close to the microphone and said softly, "My sister has always struggled with jealousy." The room laughed. My father, Warren, seated in the very front row, shook his head with visible disgust. 2 security guards grabbed my arms and pulled me toward the exit doors. As they dragged me backward down the aisle, Lydia raised the award high above her head and smiled for the cameras. And in that single awful moment, I lost everything. Before we go any further, I need to hear from you right now. Drop a comment below and tell me where in the world you're watching from tonight, because this community watches from everywhere and I love knowing who's in the room with me. My name is Evelyn Hartley, and 5 minutes ago my twin sister stole 4 years of my life while 500 people laughed at me. Cold night air hit my face the moment the auditorium doors swung shut behind me. My legs barely held me up. I pressed my back against the stone wall outside and breathed short, sharp, desperate breaths, trying to stop my whole body from shaking. Students trickled past on their way to the parking lot. 2 of them slowed down near me. I heard one whisper, "Isn't that the woman who just had a breakdown in there?" The other filmed me on their phone without even trying to hide it. I turned away from them. Then the doors burst open again. My mother, Claudette Hartley, came storming out with her cream evening coat wrapped tight across her chest. I looked at her, desperate for something. Anything. Question. A look of concern. Maybe just the smallest sign that she had seen what happened in that room. Instead, she grabbed my arm and hissed directly into my face. "You just ruined Lydia's big night." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What happened in there?" Just blame. Straight and immediate, as if she had already decided before she even stepped outside. I stared at her. It's my own mother. And that was the exact moment something cracked wide open inside me. 'Cause I suddenly understood something I had been avoiding for years. This was not the first time Lydia had taken something that belonged to me. It was simply the first time she had done it in front of everyone. Growing up, Lydia was everything I was not. She was the beautiful twin, the charming one, the one who walked into every room and made people turn their heads. Teachers loved her. Neighbors praised her. Extended family members would squeeze her cheeks at Christmas and say she was going to be something special someday. I was the quiet one. The serious one. My parents called me difficult when I was 12 years old. Not difficult in a dramatic way, just difficult in the way a child becomes difficult when she keeps pointing out inconvenient truths. Like the time Lydia crashed our father's car at 17 and told him I had distracted her from the passenger seat. I had not even been in the car. But Warren Hartley looked at me, not her, and said, "You need to stop causing problems for your sister." Or the time Lydia cheated on a biology exam and my parents told the teacher there had been a misunderstanding. Every single time, without fail, Lydia would do something wrong, something undeniable. And somehow, by the time the dust settled, I was the one apologizing. Trick was always the same. Lydia would cry. Just a few tears, perfectly placed. Her chin would wobble. Her eyes would go glassy. And every adult in the room would rush toward her like she was made of glass, leaving me standing alone looking cold and cruel. I learned very early that nobody in my family wanted the truth. They wanted the version of events where Lydia was the hero, and I was the problem. I had spent 31 years believing that if I was just patient enough and good enough, one day they would finally see the difference. I was wrong, and that had cost me everything. 3 months before the ceremony, Lydia asked to read my thesis draft. I remember the exact evening. We were sitting in my apartment. She had stopped by without warning, the way she sometimes did when she wanted something. She poured herself a glass of my wine and leaned across the kitchen counter with a big, warm smile. "I want to read it," she said. "I'm proud of you, Evie. I really am. I should have been suspicious immediately." Lydia rarely said she was proud of me. The words felt rare and warm, and I grabbed onto them like a fool. That alone should have been my first warning sign. I emailed her the full draft that same night. 112 pages of research, data analysis, and 4 years of my academic life. I even included the raw file folder with all my original graphs and field notes. I trusted her. She was my twin sister. 2 weeks later, my laptop was struck with what appeared to be a complete system crash. Every local file gone. The university server where I kept cloud backups showed a sync error that wiped the most recent version. My external hard drive, which I kept locked in my desk drawer at home, had somehow vanished entirely. The time I told myself it was a terrible coincidence. I still had a cloud backup from 3 months earlier, and I started rebuilding from there, frustrated but not suspicious. It never once crossed my mind that my own sister had arranged it deliberately. I was still exactly that foolish. And Lydia had counted on that completely. Something felt wrong. I kept pushing the feeling down, but it kept coming back. About 6 weeks after the laptop crash, Lydia began dropping hints about a secret academic project she was working on. She was vague about the details in that way she had always been vague when she did not want you asking questions. She would tilt her head and smile whenever I brought it up and say, "You'll hear about it when the time is right." I let it go. I was buried in rebuilding my thesis from the older backup files, and honestly, I did not have the mental energy to focus on Lydia too. Then one Tuesday night, I stayed late at the university library. On my way out, I passed the open door of a small study room where Lydia was on her phone. She did not hear me coming. I stopped just outside the doorway. Her voice was low and excited, the way she sounded when something was going very well for her. "Once this is published, my career is completely set," she said. "The research is solid. Nobody is going to question it." A cold feeling crept slowly up the back of my neck. Then she said something that froze me where I stood. She repeated my thesis title. Word. For. Word. I stood in that hallway for what felt like a very long time, my heart beating too fast. Maybe I had misheard her. Maybe she was referencing my work to discuss something similar. Maybe I was being paranoid. But deep down, beneath all those careful excuses, I already knew the truth. I just was not ready to face it yet. I confronted Lydia 2 days later. I drove to her apartment on a Saturday morning with my hands tight on the steering wheel the whole way there. I knocked. She opened the door in a silk robe with a coffee mug in hand, completely unbothered, as if she had been expecting this conversation and had already decided how it would go. I told her everything I had heard. The thesis title, the secret project she refused to describe, my files disappearing. My voice shook slightly, but I kept going. I needed her to hear every word clearly. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she let out a short laugh, not a cruel laugh, which would have been easier to take. It was a dismissive laugh, the kind that told me she found the whole conversation childish and slightly embarrassing. "You don't own ideas, Evelyn," she said. Those were my exact words, I told her. My title, my framework, my years of research. She took a long sip of coffee. Then she set the mug down on the counter, stepped closer to me, and lowered her voice to just above a whisper. "If you accuse me of stealing," she said, "no one will believe you." She let that sit in the air between us for a long moment. Then she smiled, a slow, completely certain smile, and added, "You know how you come across. You always have." I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream. But I was shaking too hard to form a single sentence. I walked out of her apartment. She closed the door gently behind me, as if I had simply stopped by for a visit. That whispered threat would turn out to be the most expensive mistake she ever made. For that morning, Lydia disappeared into her new identity like she had been born into it. Her social media filled up almost overnight. Academic interview requests, research podcast appearances, a feature article in a respected science journal that called her thesis a generation-defining piece of work. A university alumni newsletter ran her photo on the front page with the headline, "Local Scholar Reshaping Environmental Science." Her parents shared every single post, every article. My father, Warren, would call relatives to make sure they had seen the latest feature. My mother would print the articles and pin them on the refrigerator. They had never once put anything of mine on that refrigerator. Lydia's Instagram went from 200 followers to over 12,000 in 3 weeks. She posted photos from conferences she had never attended before. She appeared at faculty dinners in expensive dresses, laughing with professors who had no idea what she had done. She even started giving brief public talks about her research journey. I watched one of the videos once, just once. She described sitting alone in her apartment night after night, driven by pure passion for science. Cold winter nights, the failed experiments, the breakthrough moment at 3 in the morning. I recognized every single story she told, 'cause they were my stories. She had taken those too. Meanwhile, my name had quietly disappeared from the academic department board where I had been listed as a doctoral candidate. Nobody called to explain. Nobody emailed. I was simply erased. And the world kept applauding my sister's fake life while the real author sat in an apartment alone, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. I want to tell you that I stayed calm and strategic from the very beginning. But the truth is that for almost 3 weeks after Lydia's articles started appearing, I simply fell apart. I stopped sleeping properly. I stopped eating regular meals. I sat in my apartment going through every file I still had, trying to piece together what remained of 4 years of work, feeling more humiliated and powerless with every passing hour. Then one night, while searching desperately through old cloud folders for anything I might have missed, I found something completely unexpected. A folder I had forgotten I had created 18 months earlier. It was an auto-sync backup from an old email account I barely used anymore. I opened it without much hope. And there it was. An email, sent from Lydia's personal address to herself. Attached to that email was a document. The subject line read simply, "EH draft full. Evelyn Hartley." My initials. My hands were trembling as I opened the attachment. It was my thesis draft, the exact version I had emailed her 3 months before the ceremony. But it was not just a simple copy. She had added her own name to the cover page and made small formatting changes throughout, just enough, I understood immediately, to make it appear to have originated from her hands. I sat completely still in front of my screen for a long time. Then I pressed print. That single email was the first receipt. And sitting at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning with the paper still warm in my hands, I finally understood something with perfect clarity. This fight was not over. It had not even truly started yet. The next morning, I woke up with a different kind of clarity. I made coffee. I sat at my kitchen table with the printed email in front of me. I read it slowly, 3 times, the way you read something when you need to be absolutely sure you are not imagining things. I was not imagining anything. Lydia had sent herself my full thesis draft. Timestamp showed she had done it exactly 9 days before my laptop crashed. Not after. Before. That small detail changed everything. This was not a moment of weakness. She had not stumbled across my files by accident and made a reckless decision. She had made a copy of my work before ensuring my backup was destroyed. She had created a paper trail for herself while systematically erasing mine. She had planned every step. I thought about the evening she had shown up at my apartment, pouring herself wine, asking to read my thesis with that warm, proud smile. She had already decided by then. She just needed the file transferred to her. I thought about the laptop crash, the missing external drive, the sync error on the university server. None of it was an accident. Lydia had not stolen my thesis in a desperate, careless moment. She had built the theft slowly and carefully, layer by layer, the way you build something you intend to last for years. She had done all of it while looking me in the eye and calling herself my sister. The betrayal was deep enough to take my breath away. But underneath the pain, something harder had begun to form. I was not going to let this stand. I made one last attempt to reach my family before I gave up on that path entirely. I drove to my parents' house on a Wednesday evening. I brought the printed email. I brought a written timeline of every suspicious event: the laptop crash, the missing drive, the overheard phone call, Lydia's self-sent email with my draft attached. I laid everything out on their dining room table carefully and quietly, the way you present evidence to people you still hope might listen. My mother sat across from me with her hands folded in her lap. Her face was completely unreadable. My father stood at the head of the table with his arms crossed. He did not sit down. He did not look at the documents for more than 5 seconds. When I finished talking, he looked up at me with an expression I had known my whole life: tight jaw, cold eyes, the look he reserved for conversations he had already decided were a waste of his time. "You're trying to sabotage your sister," he said. Not a question. A conclusion he had reached before I had even walked through the door. "Dad, look at the timestamp on the email," I said. "She copied my file before my laptop crashed. That is not a coincidence." "Enough." His voice cut across mine like a door slamming shut. "Lydia has worked hard for everything she has achieved. This family will not let you tear that down because you are jealous." He pointed toward the front door. "Until you are ready to apologize to your sister," he said, "you are not welcome in this house." I picked up my documents. I walked to the door. I did not look back. Christmas came 6 weeks later. My parents did not invite me. I found out about the celebration because a cousin sent me a group photo through social media. There they all were, my mother, my father, 12 relatives I had known my entire life, gathered around the Hartley family dining table with its familiar cream tablecloth and the brass candle holders my grandmother had kept since the 1970s. Lydia was at the center, radiant, happy. wearing a deep green dress I did not recognize, her hair perfectly styled. On the wall behind the group, someone had printed and framed a copy of the journal article that called her thesis generation defining. My parents had hung it in the dining room like a painting. I stared at that photograph for a very long time. Later that same evening, I saw a video clip a cousin had posted. Everyone was laughing around the table, glasses raised, toasting Lydia. Then someone asked, I could not make out who, where I was, why I had not come. Lydia's response was clear. She laughed. Light and casual. Then she shook her head slowly and looked at the camera. Evelyn didn't finish her degree, she said. That was all. Just 7 words. And the table erupted in laughter. Relatives who had known me since I was born. People who had held my hand as a child. Laughing at a lie told by a thief in the house where I had grown up. My own father raised his glass and laughed right along with them. I closed my phone. I sat in the silence of my apartment. And I made a decision. The grieving was done. It was time to build a case. That Christmas video broke something in me, but it also lit something at the same time. For a few minutes after I closed my phone, I sat completely still at my kitchen table. The apartment was quiet. Outside my window, a neighbor was stringing holiday lights along his porch railing, and the little colored bulbs blinked on and off in the dark like nothing anywhere in the world was wrong. I thought about every Christmas I had sat at that same family table. Every year I had stayed quiet when I should have spoken. Every time I had told myself to be patient, to be the bigger person, to wait for my family to eventually come around and see the truth. They had never needed more time. They had always known the truth. They had simply chosen Lydia's version of it, because Lydia's version was easier, more flattering, and far more comfortable for everyone. I was the inconvenient one, the difficult one, the black sheep who complicated the perfect family picture. And they had spent 31 years making me feel like that was entirely my own fault. That night, I sat down at my desk with a notebook, a pen, and every file I still possessed. I worked until almost 4 in the morning. I was not crying. I was not spiraling into self-pity. I was organizing. The email with my draft attached. Timestamp evidence. The articles citing Lydia's original research. The overheard phone call. The night my laptop had crashed. Every date. Every detail. Written down carefully and clearly. When I finally went to bed on that Christmas night, I did not feel broken anymore. I felt focused. And for the first time since the auditorium, I felt genuinely dangerous. January arrived cold and gray, and I moved through it like a woman with a very clear plan. On the outside, I disappeared. I stopped responding to family messages. I stopped checking Lydia's social media. I stopped attending any department event where I might run into people who knew us both. Relatives who reached out received polite, short replies that gave absolutely nothing away. Lydia, I later learned, told people I had finally accepted reality and decided to move on. She seemed genuinely pleased by my silence. She had absolutely no idea what I was doing with it. Every evening after work, I sat at my kitchen table and documented everything. I organized emails by date and printed them in triplicate. I created a detailed timeline document that tracked every suspicious event, from the night Lydia asked to read my draft, all the way through the auditorium ceremony. I cataloged every public article, every interview, every social media post where she described her research in words and stories that belonged to me. I recorded every phone call between us. In my state, single-party consent made that completely legal. I backed everything up 4 ways: a personal cloud account, a physical hard drive at my apartment, a second drive stored at a close friend's place across the city, and an encrypted folder on a private server I rented under a separate email account. Lydia had destroyed my evidence once before. She would not get that opportunity again. Quiet Hartley twin had gone underground. And while my family celebrated Lydia's fake lifestyle and her stolen empire, I was building something far more permanent. I was building a case that would eventually shake everything she had constructed from the ground up. In February, the completely unexpected happened. I received a message through the university's alumni email system. The sender had a Harrington address, but the name was unfamiliar to me. Nadia Osei, listed as a graduate research assistant in the environmental science department. The message was short. I know the thesis is yours. I want to help. Please meet me. I read it 4 times. My first instinct was pure suspicion. This could be a trap. Lydia had people who were loyal to her, people she had charmed and carefully cultivated over the years. This could be someone testing me, trying to find out how much I knew before reporting everything back to Lydia. But something about the message felt genuinely different. The tone was careful, almost frightened. Did not feel like a trap set by someone confident. Felt like a message sent by someone who had been carrying something heavy and difficult for a long time. I waited 2 days before responding. We met at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the campus. Nadia was a small woman in her mid-20s with careful, watchful eyes and a tight grip on her cup. She looked around the room twice before she spoke. I was in the department server room last September, she said quietly. I saw Lydia logged into the shared system. She was using your credentials, not her own. I watched her access your research folders. My throat tightened. Did you report it? She looked down at her cup. I told my supervisor. He told me to forget it. She paused. He is one of the faculty members Lydia thanked by name in her acknowledgments. The room seemed to tilt slightly around me. I am ready to go on record, Nadia said. I stared at her across the table and felt the entire case shift beneath my feet. After Nadia and I finished talking, I sat in my car for a long time before I trusted myself to drive. She had told me everything carefully and clearly. She had seen Lydia in the department server room, logged into the shared university system using Evelyn Hartley's credentials, my login details, not her own. Lydia had accessed my restricted research folders and downloaded files to a personal external drive, then logged out and walked away. Nadia had questioned her about it. Lydia had laughed and said she was helping her sister organize some files. Nadia had not believed it, but she was a junior research assistant and Lydia was the dean's newest academic star. She had felt completely powerless to act. But she had not forgotten. And when news of what happened at the auditorium spread through the department, she had begun connecting the dots in a way she could no longer ignore. What Nadia had witnessed was not simply betrayal. It was academic fraud, unauthorized access to university systems, credential theft, the kind of violation that did not just end careers, it opened the door to formal criminal proceedings. I called Vivian Cole that evening. A colleague had referred me to her weeks earlier. She specialized in intellectual property and academic misconduct cases. When I laid out everything I had, the email with my draft, the timestamps, Nadia's account, the recorded phone calls, the public articles, Vivian listened without a single interruption. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said 4 words I had been waiting months to hear. You have a case, Evelyn. For the first time since that terrible night at the auditorium, I finally let myself breathe. In early March, the university announced its annual Winter Holiday Research Gala. The event ran every spring, a tradition with a slightly misleading name, left over from when it had been scheduled in December before a venue change years earlier. Every faculty member, major donor, alumni board representative, and regional journalist who covered academic affairs received an invitation. It was Harrington University's showiest night. The night careers were made and reputations cemented in front of the people who mattered most. And Lydia had been selected as keynote speaker. The invitation was posted on the department's public events board. She would present her thesis findings to the full audience, followed by a question-and-answer session with faculty panel members. According to the posting, it was a celebration of one of Harrington University's most exciting emerging scholars. I read that posting 3 times. Then I called Vivian immediately. She's going to stand in front of the full academic board, major donors, and the press and present my work as her own again, I said. I know, Vivian said. I already saw the announcement. Can we use this? A pause. Then, Evelyn, that auditorium is exactly the stage you need. A public presentation is a public claim of authorship. If we can interrupt that presentation with fully verified evidence, in front of witnesses who cannot simply walk away and pretend they never saw it, the university cannot quietly bury this the way institutions often try to. My heart was beating very fast. We have 6 weeks, Vivian said. We need to be absolutely airtight. Every piece of evidence authenticated. Every witness statement notarized. Are you ready for that? I looked at the case files spread across my kitchen table. I have been ready since January, I said. The 6 weeks before the gala were the most focused weeks of my entire life. Vivian was methodical, direct, and surprisingly calm for a woman who had just reviewed enough documented evidence to permanently end my sister's career and academic standing. She had handled cases like this before, she said. Not often, but enough to understand exactly what institutions tried to do to protect themselves when fraud was uncovered on their watch. Universities hate embarrassment above almost everything else, she told me during our 3rd meeting. They will try very hard to keep this quiet and contained. Our job is to make quiet completely impossible. Her paralegal spent 2 full weeks verifying and authenticating every document in my file. The email with my thesis draft attached was forensically confirmed as genuine, metadata intact, timestamp verified, and IP address traceable. My original thesis drafts, recovered from the old cloud backup, carried document properties showing my name, my university login credentials, and creation dates that predated Lydia's submission by more than a full year. Nadia had agreed to provide a formal signed witness statement. Vivian had it notarized and officially filed. The recorded calls between Lydia and me, including the one where she told me clearly that no one would ever believe me, were transcribed and legally certified. Then, at our 4th meeting, Vivian said something completely unexpected. I want you to investigate whether this is the only time she has done something like this. I paused. What do you mean? She placed a separate folder on the table and slid it slowly toward me. I have been looking at her full publication history, she said carefully. Something does not add up. She opened the folder to the 1st page. And what I found inside made my blood go completely cold. Vivian's paralegal had spent 3 days cross-referencing Lydia's published academic papers against existing literature and Harrington's own departmental records. What they found was far worse than I had imagined. The thesis was not the only stolen work. Not even close. A research paper Lydia had published 2 years earlier, the one that had earned her a departmental research grant and a glowing faculty recommendation letter, contained a methodology section lifted almost entirely from a paper written by Dr. Cho, a researcher working in Taiwan, published in an obscure regional journal that Lydia had clearly hoped nobody at Harrington would ever locate. A second paper, submitted during her 2nd year in the program, contained data tables that matched unpublished research belonging to a former doctoral student who had left the program suddenly and quietly. That student had filed a formal complaint about missing research files before she withdrew from the university. That complaint had been buried without any follow-up. And a third paper, Lydia's very first graduate submission, contained a literature review that was, in several lengthy paragraphs, almost word for word copied from an obscure 2009 dissertation stored in a digital archive that very few people accessed. My sister had not just stolen my thesis. She had been quietly constructing her entire academic reputation on other people's work for years. She had identified sources she believed were untraceable, foreign publications, obscure archives, departed students, and she had taken from them each time with cold calculation. My thesis was simply the largest, boldest theft in a pattern that had been running long before I even handed her my draft. I sat back and stared at Vivian. "Her entire career," I said quietly. Vivian nodded. "Built entirely on fraud," she replied. The deeper we dug, the sharper and more disturbing the full picture became. Lydia had not simply been lucky. She had been strategic in a way that was genuinely calculated and cold. She had selected every source the way a very careful thief selects a target, searching for the lowest risk, the least visibility, and the smallest possible chance of exposure. A foreign researcher working in a second language whose paper appeared in a journal with no English search indexing. A withdrawn student with no institutional support left to fight for her work. An obscure dissertation that had never been fully digitized or cross-referenced. And then there was the social architecture she had built so carefully around herself. The faculty mentor who had testified enthusiastically to her original thinking. 2 professors whose names appeared on grant applications for research that did not belong to Lydia. A department administrator who had, according to Nadia, been unusually accommodating about certain procedural irregularities in how Lydia's submissions had been processed. None of those people were necessarily villains. Most had probably been genuinely deceived. Lydia was extraordinarily gifted at performance. She asked the right questions in seminars. She used the right vocabulary. She looked the part so convincingly that experienced academics had never thought to look beneath the surface. But we were looking now. Vivian had established contact with Dr. Cho's research institution. A formal communication had been sent and received. The former doctoral student, whose name was Alicia Burke, had been located working quietly in the private sector. When Vivian reached her, she was not sad or defeated. She was furious. She had a story too, and she was willing to tell every word of it. Lydia's fake empire had never been built on brilliance. It had been built on silence. And the silence was about to end. 10 days before the gala, Vivian found the smoking gun. During a complete review of all my recorded calls, her paralegal had flagged a conversation I had almost forgotten about. It was from November, just 2 weeks after the auditorium ceremony, at the very peak of Lydia's public celebration. She had called me that evening, not the other way around. I had almost not answered. She spent most of the call talking about upcoming press coverage, a potential book deal her literary agent had reached out about, and an international conference where she had been invited to present as a featured researcher. Her voice had been bright and completely unbothered. Then, near the end of the call, she had said it. Clearly, without any apparent concern, as if she was simply stating a fact that required no defense. "No one will ever believe Evelyn," she had said. "She has no credible evidence, no credibility left, and honestly, everyone already thinks she had some kind of breakdown. The story writes itself." She had laughed softly at that. Then she had said one more thing. "I planned this very carefully, Nadia." She had said Nadia, not Evelyn, not me. She had forgotten, in that moment of confident gloating, who was actually on the phone with her. She had called me by another name, the name of someone she had been discussing the plan with. Someone she trusted enough to confirm out loud without hesitation that the theft had been entirely deliberate and carefully arranged. I had said nothing. I had simply listened and let the recording run. Vivian played the clip back once more. Then she set down her pen and looked at me across the table. "Evelyn," she said quietly, "we are ready." The night before the gala, I could not sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while the city moved quietly outside my window. Case files were packed and locked in a bag by the front door. Vivian had confirmed everything was in perfect order. The university's Academic Integrity Board had been notified through proper legal channels. 2 board members would be present at the gala. They were aware that a formal complaint with full supporting documentation would be filed that evening. Nadia had confirmed she would attend. Alicia Burke, who had driven 6 hours from across the state to be there, was staying at a hotel 2 streets from campus. Everything was in place. Every piece, every witness, every document. But lying there in the dark, it was not the gala I was thinking about. It was the applause. The sound of 500 people clapping for Lydia while my own slides lit up the screen behind her. The way my father had shaken his head at me. The way my mother had rushed outside not to comfort me but to blame me before she had heard a single word. Christmas video. The 7 words. The table of laughing relatives. I picked up my phone once. Lydia had posted to her social media just before midnight a photo of herself in an elegant silver dress, holding a champagne glass. The caption read, "Big announcement tomorrow night. Watch this space." 147 comments. Heart emojis. Fire emojis. Congratulations from strangers. I placed my phone face down on the nightstand. And somewhere beneath the dread and the exhaustion and the old familiar weight of being the wrong Hartley twin, something quiet and completely certain settled into my chest. Tomorrow they would all finally see. I arrived at Harrington University's Grand Hall 40 minutes before the gala began. I had not been on this campus since the night security dragged me backward out of the auditorium. Walking through those familiar corridors felt genuinely strange, like returning to a place where something terrible had happened to you, only to discover that the place itself does not remember. The hallways were decorated with framed faculty portraits and grant announcements. The grand hall at the end of the main corridor blazed with warm light, and guests in formal attire moved through the entrance in small, cheerful clusters. I was wearing a navy dress. Simple. Nothing that would make anyone look twice. The whispers began almost immediately. 2 graduate students near the entrance recognized me. I watched them lean toward each other. A faculty member I had met twice at department events paused when he saw me and then quickly looked away, as if making direct eye contact might somehow complicate things for him later. A professor I had once genuinely admired stopped me directly. "Evelyn," he said carefully, "I wasn't aware you would be here tonight." "I'm a Harrington alumna," I said pleasantly. "The gala is open to all alumni." He held my gaze for a moment, nodded carefully, and walked on. I found Vivian near the side entrance. She stood with 2 members of the Academic Integrity Board and a university legal representative. Nadia was positioned a few feet away, her face pale but her expression steady. Alicia stood beside her, calm and focused. I looked at each of them in turn. 6 months ago, I had stood in this building broken and humiliated. Tonight was different. I was not powerless anymore. The grand hall filled quickly. 400 guests, faculty members, major donors, board representatives, press, and alumni arranged themselves in rows before a wide elevated stage with a gleaming podium at its center. I found a seat in the middle section, close enough to see every expression on the stage but far back enough that Lydia would not immediately notice me when she walked out. Vivian was positioned near the venue's AV technician at the side wall. We had agreed beforehand not to acknowledge each other directly. Dean Alderton opened the evening with prepared remarks about research excellence and Harrington University's proud tradition of pushing the boundaries of scientific knowledge. He smiled broadly. His voice filled the room with the comfortable warmth of a man who had absolutely no idea what was about to unfold on his stage. Then he introduced Lydia. The applause began before she even appeared from behind the side curtain. She walked out in the silver dress from her Instagram photo, confident, glowing, every inch the celebrated scholar she had convinced this room she was. She adjusted the microphone, let the applause build and wash over her, and smiled the smile of a woman who believed she had won completely and permanently. She began to speak. Her opening was polished and perfectly rehearsed. She described her research journey with practiced emotion. The late nights, the breakthroughs, passion that had carried her through the difficult moments. I sat in my seat and listened to my life narrated back to me by a stranger wearing my sister's face. The slides loaded on the screen behind her. My graphs, my data tables, my carefully constructed conclusions. I waited. Lydia was halfway through her presentation when the projector changed. She had just reached the methodology section, my methodology section, the one I had rewritten 6 times at 3 in the morning, and was mid-sentence when the current slide simply disappeared. The audience shifted slightly, the way audiences do when a technical interruption breaks the flow of a smooth presentation. A few people glanced toward the AV station near the wall. The new slide that appeared on screen was not from any presentation deck Lydia had submitted. It was an email. Lydia's email address in the From field. The subject line read, EH Draft Full. Timestamp was clearly dated 3 months before the auditorium ceremony. The attachment was labeled, Evelyn Hartley Doctoral Thesis, Final Draft. For about 3 full seconds, the room was simply confused. Then the next slide appeared. A side-by-side comparison. My original draft on the left, Lydia's submitted thesis on the right. Key passages were highlighted in yellow. They were identical. The murmuring began quietly and spread through the hall quickly. Lydia turned to the screen. I watched the color drain from her face in real time. She turned back to the audience, then back to the screen, her mouth opening and closing without producing words. The next slide appeared. Nadia signed a notarized witness statement. Date, location, and a full account of what she had personally witnessed in the department server room. Then the recorded call transcript. Lydia's voice, printed in black text on a white background, saying clearly, "No one will ever believe Evelyn. I planned this very carefully." The murmuring became something louder and more urgent. Lydia gripped the podium with both hands, and the room began to understand, slowly, completely, exactly what it was looking at. The grand hall went silent the way a room goes silent when something truly unthinkable is unfolding in front of people. Not the polite silence of a natural pause. The kind of silence where 400 people are holding their breath at the same moment, where the air itself seems to thicken with shock, and where everyone in the room is doing the same private calculation, trying to process whether what they are seeing is actually real. The slides kept coming. Vivian had prepared 12 in total. The verified email. The side-by-side comparison with highlighted passages. Nadia's notarized statement. The recorded call transcript. A document showing Lydia's unauthorized access to my university login credentials. A compiled timeline of every public claim Lydia had made about authorship of the research since the auditorium ceremony. Then the broader plagiarism evidence. Dr. Cho's original paper placed beside Lydia's published work, matching passages marked in red. The former doctoral student's unpublished data tables placed beside Lydia's second-year submission. Paragraphs from the 2009 dissertation placed beside Lydia's first-year paper. Each slide appeared for exactly 20 seconds. Long enough to read. Long enough to fully understand. A major donor in the third row leaned over to his colleague and said something I could not hear. A journalist near the back of the hall had her phone raised. 2 faculty members seated near the front had gone completely rigid in their chairs, their expressions tight in a way that told me they were calculating their own exposure, their names on Lydia's grant applications. Dean Alderton was on his feet, and Lydia stood frozen at the podium with both hands gripping its edges, staring at the screen as if she could stop it by sheer force of will. She could not stop it. Nobody could stop it now. For about 30 seconds, Lydia stood completely still. Then she found her voice. "This is a lie." She said it loudly, pointing directly at the screen. "My sister arranged this. She has been trying to destroy my career for months." She turned to face the audience head-on, switching instantly into the mode I recognized from our entire childhood. The wide, hurt eyes, the trembling chin, the full performance of a woman being cruelly wronged. She is jealous. She has always been jealous. Every single document up there is fabricated. The audience did not move toward her. Nobody nodded in agreement. Nobody rushed to comfort her. The silence that met her performance was a completely different kind from the one she was used to receiving. This was not the sympathetic silence of people waiting to offer support. This was the silence of 400 people who had just seen documented proof and were now watching her ask them to disbelieve their own eyes. Dean Alderton walked toward the stage. His face was careful and controlled. Lydia turned to him. "Dean Alderton, this is harassment. She said this entire thing. Miss Hartley." His voice was quiet, but it carried clearly across the silent hall. "Please step back from the podium." "You don't understand, she..." "Miss Hartley." Firmer now. Lydia's composure cracked. Not in the graceful, polished way she had always made tears look. The gentle wobble, the perfectly timed catch in her voice. This was something rawer and messier. Her hands dropped from the podium. She looked around the hall at 400 faces that had been applauding her moments ago and were now watching her with a mixture of shock and quiet horror. Perfect mask had finally completely shattered, and there was absolutely nothing behind it but panic. Vivian stepped forward from the side of the hall. She introduced herself clearly and formally, her full name, her firm, and her role. She addressed the Academic Integrity Board members who were already rising from their seats in the third row. She spoke in the measured, deliberate tone of someone who had prepared every single sentence. "The documents presented tonight have been forensically verified," she said. "The email metadata and document timestamps have been authenticated by a certified digital forensics consultant. Witness statements have been notarized. Audio recordings were legally obtained under applicable state single-party consent law." She paused to allow that to settle across the room. "A formal academic fraud complaint is being filed with this university's Integrity Board tonight. Additional complaints are being filed with the professional bodies overseeing 2 journal publications. A third-party institution has also been formally notified regarding the case of Dr. Cho's research." Alicia Burke stood up from her seat in the middle of the hall. "My name is Alicia Burke," she said, her voice steady despite the fact that her hands were visibly trembling. "I was a doctoral student in this department 4 years ago. I filed a formal complaint about missing research files before I was pressured to withdraw from the program. I have documentation supporting that complaint. I am prepared to provide a full statement." The room absorbed this in absolute silence. Then Professor Wakefield, a senior faculty member who had been sitting near the front with the expression of a man watching a building collapse in slow motion, rose from his seat and addressed Dean Alderton directly. "We need to suspend this evening's proceedings," he said. "Immediately. And we need to open a full and independent investigation." Dean Alderton nodded once. "Agreed," he said. Lydia's award was formally revoked on the spot. My parents were seated in the 4th row. I had not noticed them come in. But in the chaos following Vivian's statement, the dean conferring urgently with Integrity Board members, journalists typing on phones, faculty members leaning across rows in tense whispered conversations, I looked up and there they were. Warren Hartley sat completely rigid in his seat. His hands were flat on his thighs. His jaw was set. He was not looking at the stage. He was not looking at the board members conferring in the front of the hall. He was staring straight ahead at nothing, the way a person stares when the ground has shifted beneath them and they have not yet decided what to do about it. My mother sat beside him with both hands pressed tightly over her mouth. Lydia had moved away from the stage. She stood near the side curtain with the university administrator, her silver dress still catching the stage light. From where I sat, I could see her face. The brightness was completely gone. She looked small in a way I had never witnessed before. Then something happened that I had not anticipated. Professor Wakefield stood and read aloud, in a clear, carrying voice that reached every corner of that hall, a single paragraph from the plagiarism report his department had quietly prepared 3 weeks earlier after Vivian had filed her preliminary complaint. A report that confirmed the academic fraud extended across 4 of Lydia's publications, 2 grant applications, and 1 award submission. He did not look at my parents as he read it, but everyone else in the hall did. My father's face crumpled. Just briefly. Just for a moment. Then went rigid again. Their golden child had built her empire on stolen ground. And tonight, with 400 witnesses watching, it had collapsed completely. The weeks that followed the gala moved quickly and without mercy. The university opened a formal investigation within 48 hours. 3 academic integrity officers were assigned. All of Lydia's published work was pulled from the department website pending full review. Her research grant funding, nearly $90,000 across 2 years, was frozen while the institution determined how much of it had been awarded on the basis of fraudulent submissions. By the end of the first week, 2 academic journals had issued formal retractions. Both cited substantial evidence of plagiarized content. By the end of the second week, Lydia had been formally expelled from the doctoral program. Her social media went dark overnight. The accounts that had gathered thousands of followers, the polished photographs, the academic interviews, the conference appearances, the fake lifestyle performed for strangers, went private, then disappeared entirely. The Instagram post about her big announcement was deleted without a trace. The article framed on my parents' dining room wall became something nobody in the family mentioned anymore. Sponsors who had expressed interest withdrew without comment. The potential book deal her agent had been pursuing vanished. Academics who had publicly praised her work began quietly distancing themselves. The faculty mentor who had provided her glowing recommendation letter retired suddenly and well ahead of schedule. Alicia Burke was formally offered full reinstatement into the doctoral program. She accepted. Dr. Cho's institution received a written formal apology from Harrington and a published correction. And my father, the man who had pointed me toward the door and told me I was sabotaging my sister, did not call me once. Karma does not always arrive with noise and drama. Sometimes it arrives exactly the way Lydia's empire fell. Quietly, completely, and leaving absolutely nothing standing behind it. 8 months after the gala, I stood in Harrington University's main auditorium for the second time. The room looked exactly the same. The same high ceiling. The same rows of dark wooden seats. The same wide stage with its polished podium and the warm, important feeling lights. The last time I had stood in this building, security guards had dragged me out of it while 500 people laughed at me. Tonight, the room was still full. But tonight was different in every possible way. Dean Alderton stood at the podium. He spoke about the university's renewed commitment to research integrity, carefully chosen words that every single person in that hall understood as a direct reference to what had unfolded 8 months before. Then he introduced a name. Mine. I walked onto that stage in the same navy dress I had worn to the gala. I had not bought anything new for this moment. I did not feel the need to. I looked out at the audience. Vivian was in the third row. Nadia sat beside her, smiling. Alicia Burke was there too, the smile reaching her eyes. Professor Wakefield gave me a brief, steady nod from the faculty section. The dean read a sentence from the formal investigation outcome clearly into the microphone. The original authorship of this doctoral thesis has been conclusively established as belonging to Dr. Evelyn Hartley. The applause started slowly. Then it built. I looked at the empty seats in the front row, the seats where my family had once sat. I did not feel sad about them. I felt free. The black sheep had finally won. Not through cruelty, not through revenge for its own sake, but through patience, truth, and 4 years of work that had always been mine. And this time, when the room applauded, every single person in it knew exactly who they were applauding. All right, we have reached the end of tonight's story, and I just need a moment with you before you go. First things first, if this story had you feeling something, whether it was satisfaction, shock, or you were silently cheering the whole time, hit that like button right now. That little thumbs up tells me you want more stories just like this one, and trust me, I have a lot more where that came from. Now, if you are not yet subscribed, what are you waiting for? Hit that red subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you never miss a single story. We drop new revenge content regularly, and you do not want to be the last one to the party.